we're going to do basic bookbinding. You will need a needle and thread. Bookbinders often wax their thread to make it more archival. If you want to do that, grab a chunk of an old candle and run your thread through the candle wax. It's not necessary, but it will make the thread a little stronger, a little more archival. I'm using a really long needle. Use whatever needle makes sense for your book. If it's a delicate book, you might need a smaller needle, so it'll make a smaller hole in the book. Then a very important tool is an awl. So when you punch holes through multiple sheets of paper at once for your book, you will want a very sharp point. Awls have something to hold on to so you can press in. If you don't have an awl, you can use your sewing needle. You might make a hole with the point and then push the head through, or maybe you'll find like a kitchen tool with a sharp point that you can use. But it's really important to poke a hole through all your sheets at once, so you want something substantial to do that with. So that's an awl. A really great tool to have is a bone folder. This is a cheap one. It's made out of plastic. I also have this wooden pottery tool that I use. So a bone folder helps you make really clean folds. So if you align your fold and then run the bone folder across the back from one edge, bottom edge, up to the top. This is kind of stiff mat board, so that just folded that really cleanly. It's really helpful if you're trying to fold a bunch of sheets at once, but you can use a lot of things for that, even just like a pencil or a pen. Bone folder is really helpful. I use clothespins or this kind of paper clip to hold multiple sheets of paper together while I'm binding them. So you'll see that in action in a little bit. And the next thing I do, and you'll see this in action, is I make a little strip of paper with markings for where I'm going to poke the holes. So you can measure the strip of paper before you poke your holes into your book. So those are the tools. You'll see them all in action. The first binding we're going to do is called a pamphlet stitch. And it's the most simple, but I use it the most because it's really easy and makes a really handsome little book. So first we should talk about the pages of your book and pagination. So I want everyone to do a minimum of 8 pages with images and text or whatever you do. So if you're going to have 8 pages in your book, I've numbered them here. So I have page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I would recommend making a dummy of your book first and putting the page numbers on it so you can see that when you pull your book together, you can get 8 pages out of 2 sheets of paper. So it's 2 pages per side, so that's 4 pages per sheet. And so if you paginate them, putting the page number on the bottom while it's together, and then you pull them out, you'll see that you're going to need page 1 and page 8 will be together when you're designing your book. You'll paint or draw or print the typography of page 1 and page 8. Page 2 and page 7, and into that falls page 3, and on the back is page 6, and then inside 4 and 5. So if you have a book that is more than 8 pages, it will actually need to be divisible by 4 because you have 4 sheets per page. So up from this, if you added another sheet, it would be 12 pages, and you'd want to do the pagination that way. But you also can just add an end sheet that is maybe a colorful piece of paper, and you have your 8 pages of content inside of that. So all I've done here is numbered them and slip them into a little cover. So that's that heavier cardstock. So pay attention to your pages when you're designing your book. All right, so here I have a mat board right angle I've made. So it's a piece of mat board with 2 more glued down at a right angle, and that's helpful because then I can it's what's called jogging. I can jog all my sheets together. So I push them all into the corner, and that means they're all collected. They're jogged together. So at this point I would put my clothespins on them to keep them together. If you don't have one of these, which you probably don't, or don't have time to make one, there's lots of ways to do this. You can take 2 hardcover books and just put one here, put another one up against it, and then you have a perfect right angle. Or just 2 straight things that you can align. It's really nice to have that right angle. Also, I actually use this to poke my holes with my awl. So this little corner here, I don't know if you can see, but it has tons of little holes from me using it over the years. My clothespins are going to hold everything in place, and I'm going to put that, put the spine, the inside fold, right into there so that I can poke into it. Again, you probably don't have one of these, and if you can find like a really old paperback or like an old phone book, which people don't really use anymore, that's a really nice thing to poke into because it'll take the, it'll take the point of the awl and you won't be like ruining the thing below it. So if you want to do that, just open up your phone book or your old dictionary or whatever and put the spine of your book into there, and then you can poke right in. Okay, so as I mentioned, I like to make a measuring stick. If you can see on this one, I have some faint colorful lines that I've measured. So I'm gonna do a 3-hole stitch, pamphlet stitch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my little guy here. I'm gonna put it in the corner, and then I'm going to take my little measuring stick I've made. I've already marked where I'm going to poke the holes. They are the red markings. So I'm going to take my awl. Everything's pushed into that little corner, and I'm going to poke at the red marking once, twice, and the 3rd hole going down. Okay, so if you don't have an awl, you would be taking your needle or whatever you found and making sure you get through every piece of paper in your book at once. Okay, so now we've poked our holes, and here comes, you can see them popping out on the edge, here comes the pamphlet stitch. Here are the steps. You start on the inside, so you don't need to tie a knot in your thread. I'm pulling a little extra over, and I'm starting on the inside in the middle hole. So I'm going into the middle hole that I just punched with the awl, going through to the back, and I'm going to pull it through and leave a tail. So there's a nice little tail hanging out in there. Now on the outside, my clothespins are holding everything together. I've already poked my holes. I'm going to go up to the top hole and go through, and it comes back into the middle. All right, so now pull that pretty tight, but not too tight because you don't want to lose your tail. Now you go from the top hole past the middle all the way to the bottom hole on the inside. Okay, so I came out the top and I'm going all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to just make sure my tail is hanging here. So I'm on the outside again, and you can see there's just one little gap here that I need to fill. So I go back to the center and I put my needle through. It'll come back into the inside. And now here's a really important piece. You have your tail and you have a string running down the center, and you want your tail and the new string you just pulled through to be on either side of the string that's running down the center, okay? So now I have 2 tails and I have the string that runs down the center. I'm going to snip my thread here and I'm going to tie a square knot, the 2 tails around the center thread, okay? So square knot, I'm holding the tail, I'm going to say the tail in my right hand goes behind the tail in my left. And I just make a simple knot and I pull it down. You might, before you make your knot, want to make sure it looks good on the outside, it's tight enough. Pull it down. So the first knot is your right hand goes behind. The second knot is your right hand goes in front of the left string. So when I tie a square knot, it's just 2 knots, but I think about the thread in my right hand and I say behind for the first knot and in front of for the second knot. Now I have a square knot, and then you just trim your tails. So you could leave them dangling if you have some pretty thread and you think it looks good, or as long as your knot is tight, you can cut it as close to the knot as you can, and you get this handsome little, you know, it's pretty, it's white on white paper so it disappears, and then on your spine you just have this little, you can barely see it, but it's really simple, and that's the pamphlet stitch. Okay.